Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 425, and my guest is Alaric Rocha. Alaric's film, Love, Blood, and Aztec Demons, the lost films of Juan Moctezuma II, has been a 10-year labor of love and quest to explore and restore the lost films of a legendary Mexican filmmaker whose complicated life and obsessions cost him everything. Alaric is also an instructor at the Los Angeles Film School, where I recently saw a screening of the film. It is fantastic. I absolutely loved it. It's got love triangles, lucha libre matches, mayhem, love, obsession, betrayal. It's got everything. It's like no documentary I have ever seen, and that is for sure. I really enjoyed this conversation and learning more about Alaric's project and where it's going. We're actually going to be in a couple film festivals coming up at the same film festivals together, so that's pretty exciting. It's always fun when friends do well. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. It's really interesting. General stuff. Hey Human Podcast is now on YouTube under official Susan Ruth. I'm on Patreon at Susan Ruthism. Helps keep the show ad-free. Please become a Patreon person of the show. TikTok at Susan Ruthism, as long as TikTok survives. Check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests and the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. And follow Susan Ruthism on social media. You can find my music on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you get your music. And rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being you and for spreading the word and all of that good news. Be well, be kind, be love. Here we go. Alaric Rocha, welcome to Hey Human.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to see you.
You too.
And you're at this LA Film School.
That's correct. Yes. This is currently where I work. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you teach there?
I've taught directing classes, working with actors. I've taught production classes, writing classes. Currently, I teach an intro class, which is a lot of fun because everything I tell the students about movies is sparkly and twinkly, and yeah, we always have a good time.
None of the doom and gloom that social media tries to tell us.
Yeah.
Where were you from? Where's your family from? I know that's a big part of your story, so let's get into that.
Yeah, I was born in Rockford, Illinois, so I grew up in the Midwest. My mother is white American woman, but my dad he was born in the United States, but his parents came from San Luis Potosí in Mexico. And yeah, so this is significant for me because my grandparents came to the States. They came to Chicago. It's kind of cute. They met in Chicago, not in San Luis. And my grandfather tells a story that he went to Weeble's, this department store, to ask for credit. And he was flirting with the girl at the counter, but she said, "You need to meet Lee in the back." And she brought in my grandmother, and that's how they met. Like, until I look in the mirror, like, I think of myself as a white boy from the Midwest. You know, I grew up on a farmhouse and everything. We weren't farmers, but we lived on a farmhouse. And so my grandparents didn't really bring Mexican culture to our family. They were very concerned about being targeted for racism. So like, they didn't speak Spanish around my aunts and uncles or my dad. They didn't cook a lot of Mexican food. It was like all their Mexican heritage was kind of hidden. But there was one thing that my grandfather shared with me, and that was some of these Mexican Moctezuma movies. And that, I know that's what we're going to talk about, but that's how I got into this. I was like, this was the one Mexican thing my grandparents shared with me. And so I've kind of spent a lot of my life trying to reconnect with my Mexican roots. And like, I don't know, even for a long time, I wasn't even comfortable saying I am Mexican because I didn't feel like I didn't speak Spanish. Like, so I've spent a lot of my life trying to earn the right to say that. And I'm hoping that's what I've done with this project.
It's interesting. Identity is such a huge part of being a human that for a kid in the Midwest, especially Illinois. I mean,
Right.
it's as Midwesty as you can get, really.
Right.
Everyone from Illinois is just kind of chill and there. And were you even aware of, I guess, the subversiveness of what your grandparents were doing, or just it wasn't even talked about whatsoever?
Not at all, really. Like again, like besides the movie, like there are a couple Mexican dishes. Like my vivid memory of my grandfather is his kitchen. Like he was a cook. So even though he tried to hide some of his Mexican spices, the one thing he always had his homemade Tabasco sauce he would keep in his suit jacket. Which again, it's kind of this thing. Like we would go out to a restaurant and he'd like look around and sneak it out like it was this, some marijuana or something, and maybe it was. And he would sprinkle it on his food and then tuck it back in his coat pocket so no one could see it. And then he would eat whatever we ate at the restaurant, so he was hiding and bringing out his own. So like it was little things like that I just thought were cool, but I didn't realize that he was doing all of that because he was afraid of being singled out or harmed or anything like that. But as I grew older and talked with my father, and I actually did, thankfully, a few years before my grandfather passed, I was able to do an interview with him, and I was able to kind of have more of an adult conversation with him about some of this stuff. So,
I love that you had that opportunity.
Yeah.
So important. Did you have an inkling of the desire to have a creative life when you were a kid? Did that manifest in playtime or in school?
Yeah. So my father is a color pencil artist. So art was definitely part of our life. And my mother taught children. So art education was important to her. And movies, again, like I had to kind of dive into Mexican film on my own, but growing up, movies were a big part of my childhood with my dad. And what I loved about it is he would watch heavy movies like The Godfather and 2001. Some movies that I was probably too young to watch, but he would watch them anyway because he would draw. I just have these memories of him being very focused, drawing with his sharp color pencils, and like just wanting to be near him. So we would watch the movie that he put on, whatever movie it was, and then eventually we would start asking, more questions about like, why is Michael doing that, or why is why this, So I kind of learned some basics of film language just by watching those movies with my dad. But he also loved like really campy movies of like the 50s and 60s, like Earth versus the Flying Saucers and a lot of the Godzilla Mothra movies. So we also got this wonderful balance of real campy movies of the era as well. And he loved to talk during the movies and make jokes and stuff like that. So it was always fun watching movies with my dad.
Do you have siblings?
Yes, I have one brother. Yeah, and he's more into computer effects and CGI and stuff like that. But we would both, again, we lived on this farmhouse, so like we would spend our days walking into the prairie, and there we had like our own little forest, and so we would play out scenes from movies and stuff like that, and pretend we were fighting a predator or playing Ghostbusters or something like that. So yeah, we were definitely a very creative family.
Let's get into Moctezuma. Tell me about the first time you saw one of his films, and you said it was a bonding experience with your grandfather and with your culture and history.
Sure.
Let's get into that a little bit, because I know that that's pretty much the focus of your life right now.
Right. Yeah. So it was on a VHS tape, like I remember, and it was a copy. So like I don't remember like poster image or anything. I just remember the image of the the old VHS tape box and everything. And it was kind of hidden. It was like at the end of another movie. I remember we would always squeeze, we would do long play, so you could squeeze 2-hour movies onto a VHS tape, but that degraded the quality. So there was always like this kind of, but for me, that's like part of the nostalgia. It was all in Spanish, so my grandfather would translate some of it for me. And the movie was the first one I restored with Moctezuma. It was called Una Mujer Sin Precio, Priceless Woman, from 1961. And it's about this scientist who he's working with AI. He's trying to create artificial intelligence in a robot. And his wife is killed in a car accident. So he builds a robot copy of his wife. And the fun thing about the movie is that there's a luchador in it. So I don't know if we'll get into it, but like lucha libre is a big part of Mexican cinema. This is what I've learned. Like there's all these It's a whole genre of films. And the luchadors of Mexico were kind of like the Marvel superheroes for us today, but this was like in the 50s and 60s. So El Santo, the Blue Demon were kind of the most famous. And there was this other wrestler in this movie named the Scorpion. And originally in the film, apparently the Scorpion, the robot malfunctions, so the Scorpion has to battle with her and defeat her and everything. And the scientist kind of goes mad because, it's his wife, but no, it's a machine. It's like, so it's for such a campy movie, they actually really dive into some interesting philosophical ideas of like, what does it mean to be alive? Like, is artificial intelligence deserving of, being treated like a human being? But what happened is the Scorpion fell in love with the actress who was playing the robot. And Moctezuma was also in love with this woman. So the Scorpion was cut out of most of the movie because Moctezuma got jealous. So, and I didn't learn any of this until, much later in my life when I started doing the research. So the version I saw was like, there's just one scene with a luchador discussing, the ethics of making artificial intelligence. And that's it. So it's, as a kid, you're like, why is this guy standing in a mask with no shirt talking to these people in suits about? And those are the kind of questions I would ask my grandfather. He was like, he's a luchador. And I'm like, okay, cool. But yeah. So that was the start for me. That movie was kind of the start of my research and like figuring out all those stories and stuff like that.
And how many films are known or attributed to him?
5 as of right now. So the Priceless Woman was the second one. And the last one he did was called 1,000 Paths of Death in 1977. So first one was in 1959, and then the last one was 1977. So not a lot of films, but and that's part of what my documentary is about, is how and why he was only able to make 5 movies, because there was this rivalry between the Scorpion and Moctezuma. So as Moctezuma kept trying to make movies, Scorpion was trying to suppress him. So it was an uphill battle his whole life making movies.
It's a movie within a movie within a movie.
Exactly. Yeah.
What was something surprising to you about Moctezuma as you were working through his body of work?
I mean, he's a controversial person. Like there is the filmmaker and the artist in me that really admires what he's accomplished and is kind of frustrated and sad like he didn't get to make more. And a lot of the movies that we have left of his, they've been butchered. Like there's not a lot of them left, again, for various reasons. But at the same time, like there are stories that he wasn't the nicest guy. I mean, there's a lot of stories of like the tortured artist and everything, but it's always the question is like, well, what's acceptable? What's okay? And because he really pursued this woman, Lisa, this actor, she was his childhood sweetheart. And really all the movies he made in his life were an attempt to woo her back to him, because she ended up marrying the Scorpion. And so then it becomes a question of, it's like, was it okay? Was it inappropriate of him to just like continue to pursue her? That's part of the reason the Scorpion was trying to suppress his filmmaking, because he's making movies for his wife. It's like, dude, like it's one thing, if a guy like, flirts with your girl, but like he made a whole movie to try to woo her back. And what we'll see, this kind of culminated in this lucha libre match that had a really serious accident for Lisa. It's hard to admire Moctezuma knowing that he kind of I don't know. If he was alive today, I think he would have been Me Too'd, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I got it.
Yeah. He pushed it too far.
The Scorpion married the man who is the Scorpion married the actress who performed in the movies. Did she too have a fate worse than death? Did she, in other words, was her life torn between them as well, or was she loyal to Scorpion but a working actress, so she still wanted to have the work?
Right. She was a working actress. She did other films besides the ones with Moctezuma. And yeah, that's where it's interesting too. It's like we don't know, like, did she love, it's very much the story from Casablanca, where we don't know if if she loved Humphrey Bogart or the other guy.
I would argue she loved him. That's why she got on the plane. But that's
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's so by that logic, then I would say Lisa loved her husband, the Scorpion, because she stayed with him. She stood by him, and they remained married until their death.
And you can love more than one person.
Exactly. Yes.
Your whole life. Yeah.
Right. And that's the other thing, because Moctezuma did coax her enough to be in one other movie called Demonoid, which they filmed kind of up in the mountains. I've been there. It's in this place called Las Pozas in the mountains of Huasteca in Mexico. It's a beautiful place. It's actually in the state of San Luis, where my grandparents were from. And so the stories I've heard is that when they were making this movie, Moctezuma wasn't really focused on the movie. He was just like happy to be with this woman again, and there are rumors that they were hooking up and stuff like that. So yeah, again, I don't hold judgment. It kind of makes me happy that he got that connection, but I do think then that's what kind of started him down this path of like obsessively trying to make more movies for her.
Yeah. Movie sets are like Vegas, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Do we know very much about Moctezuma's childhood or how he grew up, his influence?
So he and Lisa came from this town in the state of Michoacan, a town called Juanitzio. And I've been there as well. So I lived in Mexico for about a year after I graduated. I taught at Tec de Monterrey, a university there. So I got to do a lot of research for this when I was there. So I went to Juanitzio, and it's this very cinematic, very beautiful. It's a town that's on an island in a lake, and they are known to have like the most beautiful, extravagant Day of the Dead celebration. So I got to go there for Day of the Dead, and it was really amazing. The marigolds are everywhere and everything. And as the sun's setting, you take this boat out to the island, and then it's basically a giant hill on this island. So as you're walking up the hill, there's all these little shops and stuff, and people are selling things. There's little kids running around with, jack-o'-lanterns asking you for pesos and stuff like that. So I imagine like this very much influenced Moctezuma and his interest in horror movies and stuff like that. And so from what I understand, he first saw movies, little villages like that back in the day didn't have movie theaters. So they would have traveling projectionists travel the country and come to these little towns and set up a projector and show some movies. So the story is that's how he got introduced to movies. And he and Lisa really enjoyed Dracula, the original Dracula, not the Bela Lugosi one actually, but I don't know if you know, but when they made the Bela Lugosi Dracula on the same sets, but with a Spanish speaking cast, they shot a Spanish language version of the movie. And I love it because they shot the Bela Lugosi version during the day, and then at night, the Spanish speaking crew would come in and shoot. And I'm like, it's better already because they had to shoot it at night. Like, so this is better. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they fell in love with Dracula, and, the story is, they would cling to each other and stuff like that. So watching the movie. So I think that was like the impetus for Moctezuma's interest in horror movies, his falling in love with Lisa. Like his whole life, he just wanted to have that again, where they're watching a movie they made together, a scary movie, and she's clinging to his arm because it's a fun scare.
By your description, I would imagine in his mind then every movie was really a love letter to Lisa.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what happened to him, and why are these lost films? Scorpion, does he have that much power that he was able to silence Moctezuma, or what happened there?
So a lot of it was kind of Scorpion executing his influence. Never directly. There was also during this time, we're talking like late 60s, early 70s in Mexico, there was a lot of government oppression. There were a lot of student protests. There's a tragic incident, which was also represented in one of Moctezuma's movies called the Tlatelolco Massacre of 1968. So there was this massacre that happened. Students were gathering to protest the government and their oppression, and I don't know, there's a lot going on, but basically at the time the head count was 300, but officially now we know years later that it was more like 3,000 people were just children, teachers, parents were shot and killed in this space, and it's a real tragic event. So Moctezuma made a movie about that. And what is, I think, especially tragic about this thing is the government at the time, like, didn't want the world to know that this was happening because they were hosting the Olympics. So any kind of talk about this, any evidence of this was quickly suppressed. So when they got word that Moctezuma made this movie, that, it was a monster movie inspired by what happened, but anything remotely close to it, they just like shut down. So that was the one movie that was the hardest to restore because there are just bits and pieces kind of scattered all over the world, really. The full movie's gone, like it's mostly destroyed. So we just kind of have like this short little version of it. So that was, one thing. And then he just made a lot of enemies. There's other stories that like he funded one of his movies by laundering money for a cartel. But then when he stopped doing that, then he couldn't, that movie got screwed up. There's also stories that like he would bring movies he tried to bring a movie to the States to sell here to get, some kind of international recognition. But in a lot of times what happened is that distribution companies would bring in foreign films and they would redub them. They would add scenes. They would change things to make it more marketable to American audiences. So then his movies kind of got, mauled because of that kind of thing as well. So each movie has its own different story as to how and why it was kind of suppressed or destroyed or whatever. They all do kind of link back to Scorpion in some way.
It's interesting too, because as you mentioned, the first time you experienced one of his films with your grandfather, that it was at the end of a copy of a copy. There's already this idea of secrecy around it, sneaking it into behind other films.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. What have you learned about yourself through this experience of documenting this larger than life character?
That's a good question. I mean, again, like I feel like Moctezuma is kind of a controversial person, but I still really respect and admire his work. When I think about my own work and the art that I like to make, it does take priority. Like, if in my life, so it's like if I had to make a choice of like, am I going to make this movie? Am I going to, put my money into this, or I don't have a savings at all because I've been putting, I don't get to go on vacation very much because I always put the money into making the movie.
Yeah, the life of a creative. Exactly.
Yeah. So in some ways, like I look at Moctezuma and I'm like, if this is exactly what Moctezuma would have done, so I'm in good company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it scary to dig in? It sounds again like maybe some people don't want him talked about. Was it scary for you at all to uncover some of the rocks and look underneath them?
Yeah, because like I said, for a long time he was my hero, and I would say he still is. But then like as I started to uncover some of this stuff, it's like, oh, but he did do some shady things, and I don't know if I agree with the reasoning behind. Again, going to back, like, what sacrifices would you make for your art? Like he definitely made some intense sacrifices that I don't know if I would go that far in the way that he did. Yeah.
Is he appreciated now in Mexico, or is he still subversive? And do we know where he's buried or anything like that?
Technically, we don't know where he's buried or if he's possibly even still alive. Yeah. I mean, he would be, I think he was born in the late 30s, so he'd be pretty old by now. So unlikely. I would guess that if he's somewhere back in Juanitzio, where he came from. So yeah. So even though he's kind of controversial, there are many filmmakers I've spoken to that have said he's definitely influenced their work, and many people like I've been really trying really hard with this project to like talk to some big names like John Carpenter or Sam Raimi or Guillermo del Toro, because I see Moctezuma isms in their films. And I've talked to other filmmakers that are like, it looks so much like that, like for the best example is in Evil Dead. In all the versions of Evil Dead, there's the tree roots that come alive, and grab people and drag them into the forest. So that happens in one of Moctezuma's movies, Demonoid, where these leaves come out and drag people and they drag.
It's also in The Wizard of Oz.
And that's true. Yeah. So there's all these, examples of things that he's done, like little horror bits here and there. Or another one is in Alien. The first time we see the alien creature in the tubes, like it kind of reaches out at you and grabs you, and that is also in Demonoid. Like there's this moment where this demon reaches out and it looks just like an alien, and it's one of those things where it's like, Ridley Scott could have done the same shot and, it was just a coincidence, but there's so many coincidences, again, from John Carpenter, Ridley Scott, Sam Raimi, Guillermo del Toro. So my hope is that they'll get wind of this project and allow me to at least talk to them and at least maybe in secret tell me if they've been influenced by Moctezuma or not.
And the name of the film, Love, Blood, and Aztec Demons, The Lost Films of Juan F. Moctezuma the Second. My gosh, that is a very long title.
Yes, yeah.
The Aztec Demons must have been really fun to research.
Yes. I mean, it has been something that's interested me as a filmmaker, like wanting to make movies more about different, because like a lot of horror movies about demons or possession and stuff like that, they're usually grounded in the Catholic Church, right? Or at least, those Catholicism and stuff like that. So it's like I've been really interested in seeking out like horror movies based on an Indian curse or a Jewish curse. I'm grateful. I just met a filmmaker who made this movie called Satanic Hispanics, which is all about Aztec demons or Mayan demons and stuff like that. So I do talking about like diversification. Like I feel like we need to see more horror story. We need to see monster stories from different cultures instead of being saturated by, as much as I like The Exorcist, right? There's a lot of other horror stories out there from different cultures. Yeah.
Sure. The jinn are very scary.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Have you grounded more in sense of self in the lineage of your family tree?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, I do feel more comfortable and confident introducing myself as a Mexican now. So I think that was, kind of the goal. I'm still practicing my Spanish. I think that will help a lot too. But having all the knowledge of the Aztec lore and, having lived in Mexico and knowing the places there, specifically to like Moctezuma, yes, I think I feel more connected to my roots and to my grandparents as well. Yeah.
Did you try and track down Scorpion or Lisa?
Yeah. So they passed away in the 80s, but we were able to interview for our project the son of the Scorpion, who is also a lucha libre wrestler. So, and it's interesting, talking about like different perspectives. It was interesting to get his perspective because a lot of people I interviewed were fans of Moctezuma, but Scorpion's son is not. He has some unhappy memories about Moctezuma. So,
well, yeah, there's a lot of family dynamic going on there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone listening is aware of some of the brilliant soap operas from that region, but they could get pretty convoluted.
Yes. Well, and that's what Lisa did end up becoming a telenovela producer. So you might have seen some of her stuff for sure. Yeah.
What's the plan to get this movie out and get people excited and interested in this?
So we're doing a screening. So at the Los Angeles Film School where I teach, I've been, and when I've completed restoring the Moctezuma films, they're all short versions. So I've been entering those into film festival to try to get them around the world. So the screening that we're having is kind of lining up all of the Moctezuma movies chronologically and kind of putting it all in one piece. And that should be available on a streaming service soon. We did get a distributor for that, so I'm very excited. And as soon as I know where, I will let you know. But then the next big step for me is making this documentary, like putting the whole documentary together where we will, talk to the Scorpion's son, talk to Moctezuma's cinematographer, some of his producers, some of the actors that have worked with him, to try to give you a full picture of who he is.
I watched the trailer, which I don't generally do because I don't like going into movies with any knowledge of the movie I'm about to see. I love going in blind. But since we were going to be talking today, I figured it was a good idea to watch it. But I'm very much looking forward to seeing the film and to moderating the panel.
Thank you.
And it's a heck of an undertaking. Certainly to 5 films, that's a wild ride, considering how much it takes just to put one movie together. I know the time it takes to put together a documentary, which is just a reference for people listening. It could be 1,000 hours. I mean, there's so much to then edit down and navigate to tell a story within a story. So hats off for that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tell people how they can find you and information about the film.
Sure. So the website for Moctezuma is whereisjuanmovie.com.
Where is Juan movie? And Juan is spelled Juan.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. My personal work, it's bluebassoon.net. I missed the .com. So yeah, BLUEBASSOON.net.
Do you play the bassoon?
I do not. The story behind that is the first movie I ever made was based on a dream I had, and in the dream there was a blue bassoon. So I just thought it sounded good.
I love it. That's great. How many films have you made?
I've mostly made shorts throughout my career so far. So this anthology and the documentary will be my first features, and I'm hoping that will lead to the next thing I want to make, which is going to be kind of ready to make a departure from Moctezuma. So the next thing I'm going to do it's still horror. It's Bambi taking revenge on the hunters who killed his mother. So it's going to be a horror comedy is my goal.
Animated?
No, I'm going to do the animals with puppets.
Oh, fabulous.
Yes. So think like Gremlins, or I always think of the rabbit from Monty Python and the Holy Grail that jumps. Yeah, that kind of thing.
It's got fangs. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. For some reason, cute things doing violent things makes me laugh.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm excited to see what happens next and where it will all go. And I will keep my listeners updated as you have updates for me.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate you listening.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.